Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next edition of Conversations with Armadillo. So, as before, these are non-scripted, not quite a fireside chat, more of a sort of a conversation between two technical people, no sales, no slides. My name's Daniel. I'm Chief Technology Officer at Armadillo Managed Services, and I'm here with someone very special today. Erik, let you introduce yourself, please.
Hello, yes. Thank you, Dan. My name is Erik de Bueger. I'm a Dutchman. I work for Sumo Logic as a senior solutions engineer, and I've been working in the space of security, big data analytics for a long time, actually, in several roles, ranging from sort of software engineering to solution engineering to actually having my own company and managing, a business alongside this.
Fantastic, thank you. So, Erik, I'm sure certainly many people, I first heard about Sumo Logic a long time ago because I used to use your free cloud offering. So, when I was going through that phase of my life, I had a whole bunch of Raspberry Pis and servers at home. I started putting all the login together, and I sort of geeked out over this fantastic SIEM tool, the cloud tool, and it was introduced to me by one of your ex-employees as well, a colleague of mine called Mark. So before we get going, out of curiosity, is that still an option? Are you still offering that free service to people?
Yes, it is. Yes, it's one of the advantages, I believe, of being cloud native, where we can make it very low, like so no touch. People can go to the website, create an account, start pushing data, and get some benefits. That has no sort of contains no work for Sumo Logic, so to speak, right? There's nothing that we have to do special. But yes, so that offer is still there.
Okay, so look, you mentioned cloud native, so I think I'd like to start on that one there first. So a lot of vendors will claim they are cloud native. Not all of them necessarily are, and it feels like a little bit of a marketing spin from many people. Could you elaborate on what that means to you in the Sumo Logic world?
Yes, indeed. It's actually quite an important feature for us. We've been hammering it a bit, I think, in our marketing approach. And what we may have not done so well is actually translate that into what are the benefits for that? Who cares? Yeah, I mean, and there we go a little bit deeper is like, yes, a lot of people claim we are in the cloud and then it's good enough. Well, the true benefit of being cloud native as we are is, for example, if you take an account in, say, Frankfurt, where we have what we call a deployment, there is only one Sumo Logic running in Frankfurt. So many of our competition will actually create or spin up an environment for you in then maybe Frankfurt or wherever the location is, yeah. And you may argue, well, do I care? Actually, if you look at big data and if you look at security and SIM especially, you would care. It turns into a lot of smaller benefits. Let me sort of take one as an example. So in our SIM, we can actually build context. Yeah, we can start keeping an eye on things and start remembering things. And that whole concept of building a context, yeah, and keeping that around for a longer time for thousands of customers, for petabytes of data, it can swell up to, humongous amounts of memory or resources that you need. If you have to deploy that, if you have to cater for that in all small, specific setups for your customers, that becomes a nightmare. Yeah, because each of those individual instances have to be, designed to swell up and swell down again, where in our environment, you just live in a shared environment, and all that we care about is that AWS is large enough to support our microservices-based architecture, right? So it gives us a lot of capability. This is one example, but it gives us multiple examples of where we can do things just a little bit different because we can use this semi-unlimited amount of resources. Does that make sense, Dan, actually?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that first attracted me to Sumo Logic, certainly when I was using it, was the fact that it was a cloud service. We don't need to mention the competition, but your other competing products, they have on-prem solutions and things like that. But the draw of having all your data centrally in the cloud is massive. Okay, and it's a huge benefit.
It is. And I mean, I started out as a software engineer. I've been a software engineer for 15 years. I started out, I think, in 85 or something, so way old. And in those days, porting was an important concept in software engineering, where you developed something on Linux and you needed to port it to Windows or to OS2 or to whatever other sort of platforms were out there. And my experience through the years in many different areas have been, actually, I've learned that porting is miserable. So you design something to make use of the platform that you build it on, and then another platform comes around, hey, I want your stuff too, and you start like, trying to push a circle into a square area, it always loses quality. And that point that I want to make is that if you start out as an on-prem solution and you then figure out, hey, my customers want to go to cloud, there's benefit to clouds, you are on the back foot. It never works. And for the competition, and there is many nice products out there, I know them intimately, I will say nothing bad about them, but if you're designed for on-prem and you go to cloud, it's almost mission impossible. You lose out so much. You almost have to redo it. And there's never money nor time to redo it. Yeah. So that's the advantage of Sumo Logic. We started out as cloud native. We use microservices. We are on AWS, and that's it. And if you cannot live with that, then, well, we have to say sorry. But yeah, sorry for my long answer. But I mean, that's kind of the,
So I just want to jump back on something you mentioned. So
Sure.
Context, you said. So context is a topic I love talking about with customers. So what context means to me is, the example I give is a SOC has gallons and gallons of data and alerts and events coming in and everything else, but they're all individual. So attempt on a firewall or an alert from a log file, and the really valuable products that a SOC use are the ones that wrap a context around it. So it's not just an inbound attack on a firewall or potential DLP event. It gives you that what the context. So that inbound traffic came from this country, that could be a known hacker group, what it means to my business. And so you can convert a tool. If you've got context in your tooling, you can convert your data and your alerts into something truly useful. And that is something super hard to achieve, and it has immense value. So could you elaborate a little bit and maybe also dive into some of the what Sumo Logic really is, about how Sumo Logic could then enable a customer to detect and correlate an event just purely from data?
Yeah, certainly. No, it's a very good point, actually, and it starts all with the way that we ingest data, where we are what we call schemaless ingest. It means, like, for us, there is no database with columns and relationships. It's all flat. That may sound like a disadvantage. Is actually an advantage, because it makes it really easy to ingest all of this data. But then the disadvantage is maybe it all looks alike. Yeah. So as you say, you need to start making sense out of it, correlate multiple events, start building a picture of what's really happening here. Yeah. What matters. And there's two ways of talking about context. One way is the automation that we have in our platform that actually does exactly as you say. So if you decide to actually use our SIM platform, we take all that unstructured data, we make an attempt to automatically recognize the data, so start understanding. What does it mean? I mean, this is a source IP address, this is a username, this is a file hash, this is an API key. We're pushing it into a schema, and we then start correlating it, pivoting around what we call entities. Entities are objects, could be anything. I mean, could be an ugly user string or an email address or a nice user address or an IP address or a MAC address or an API key or anything. And we start remembering it. And because we normalized all of that sort of unstructured data, we can start detecting things. I mean, network scannings where you don't detect it, or known patterns in the internet, like, hey, this file hash looks really bad and stuff like that. Yeah. And we start pivoting that around what we call these entities. They start gaining penalty points. And when it ripens, when there is enough penalty points over a longer period of time, we say, hey, this now somebody needs to take a closer look. So then you actually have all this context where a multitude of completely different data have been sort of gathered together, correlated, and given you a sort of a high level alert. So that's actually one side of the story. The other side of the story then is, and that is actually the context that I'm most excited about always, people expect stuff to work out of the box. And in that sense, I always give them a little bit of bad news to say, yes, but we can only detect generic things, yeah, things that work for everybody. But you, as a customer, you know that, hey, this is my web farm. Yeah, all these IP addresses that look like this, they are my web farm, and my web farm communicates north-south, never east-west. I don't know that. You can tell me that. So we build a platform, rule-based, which is really convenient, where you can bring in that knowledge in a really easy manner, where you say, hey, in my network, in this particular network segment, I know there is no lateral communication, and you can make this as smart as you want. You can say, this is my data center. This is where my databases reside. If they get restarted, I know it has to be from somebody that has a specific role, yeah? And I know it has to originate from a stepping stone. So I can model these things in my SIM or in my Sumo Logic environment, and I can start detecting these things. And that is actually context that you have brought in on a high level that we can then use to push petabytes of data through it and detect that one time that, you know, something is violated, and hey, it gives you an alert. And yeah, it's by design then it's very contextual and very specific for the customer. But that's work that you as a customer will have to do.
So what does that look like? What is the process there? So because it sounds very daunting. Okay, so I'm pushing all my data up into your platform, and now I want to make use of it, because without the context, it's just data, it's just log data and everything else.
Exactly.
So if I sat down now in front of the Sumo Logic console, and you're sitting next to me, I mean, what sort of steps would we walk through to start producing context in that data?
Okay, well, there is a workflow, I would say. Yeah. So the first thing, and it depends a little bit who you. This is also a little bit of a religious discussion. Yeah. It depends who you ask. You'll get my story, but I have to say, my story is based on like probably 15 years experience in this specific environment, working with competitive tools intimately. So it has some foundation, if I may say so myself. Yeah. But so the most valuable first step is, the most difficult step often is to bring the data in. That is, we make it very easy because we have this schemaless ingest. So you don't have to know much about the data. As long as it's textual, you can bring it in. But sometimes the data is hidden in a database or behind a firewall or in a specific API environment where you have to play the API in order to get the data out. So that is very often what I would call the heavy lifting. Then you get it into Sumo Logic, and then the very most important first step that I say, and that many people actually want to skip because maybe it's not so convenient, but it's visualizing your data. You use the app store that we have, or you build your own dashboards if there is no app available, and you start looking at your data. So say that you bring in VPN data. Yeah, the most important step is to understand your data. You go, wait a minute. What is a crazy remark is that? It's people's data. They surely know how their VPN works. Well, I tell you, no. There's many surprises. I've seen situations where people bring in their VPN data and they find out and they start looking at the volumes like, hey, we want to see any connections that have over a terabyte in the night or something. Yeah. And you find umpteen. And like, what the hell is going on? Well, it turns out that they're running a shitty script or configuration on their laptops. I've seen this in multinationals where people have tried at night automatically to back up not just their laptop, but the entire estate from, in this case, well, I won't mention the name, but so that, of course, that starts failing at some point. But every night they're like sucking in these huge. So you find these exceptions. That's my whole point. Yeah. And you can only do that if you visualize your data, if you have the tools to do that in a nice and good way. You start listing the exceptions, and then you are ready to go for the next step and say, hey, now I'm ready to build an alert or a rule that say, hey, if there is this one VPN connection that tries to suck empty my network overnight, then I can make a rule. And yes, you can call me at 3 o'clock at night and wake me up if that happens. Because if you skipped that visualization part, you will be woken up every night 6 times. Yeah. So it's to repeat, make it short, it's like onboarding the data, visualizing the data and understanding it, and then, as you say, contextualizing it, getting the alerting going and all of that stuff. That's what I would say the general flow of events. And so you need these 3 to be supported strongly in your technology: onboarding, collecting the data, visualizing it, and then the high value part, the correlation and the alerting and what have you.
Fantastic. Now you've mentioned I'm going to pick you up on a phrase you've mentioned twice now. So you said schemaless ingestion. So
yes.
I know from when I've used other tools that take an API ingestion, and they usually you have to match data fields. So here's my guess here a little bit, which I'd like you to elaborate on. So schemaless ingestion sounds to me a bit like I can push my data up in whatever format it is, and Sumo Logic can understand it and interpret it and put it to pieces.
Up to a certain level, yes, that is exactly right. Yeah, I'll explain it a little bit deeper then. So what it means is that when you send a line of text to us, most loggings is what it is, right? A line of text, or maybe a piece of XML, or a piece of, I don't know, any JSON or whatever, right? So, but it needs to be textual for Sumo to work. Yeah. What we do, we take that bunch of text. All that we do is index it. So we tokenize it. So we look for points and commas and spaces and whatnot, basically make words out of it. We label it. So source, the reason why we collected it, the time, maybe the source category that you've put on it as a customer. Say, hey, that's my, I don't know, my Linux logs or my Windows log, whatever. Yeah. And that's it. And then we index all of that. So there is very little structure. There's a few meta elements that you can use to search it and organize your data. But other than that, it's all just words. So if the text contains name equals Daniel, name equals Eric, name equals God knows who, yeah. So if you search for an IP address, a host name or whatever, and there's like 10,000 messages coming back, hey, they all have this piece of text in them, yeah. But all of these contain, or some of these contain, as I said, a piece of text says name equals Daniel, name equals Eric. Then the system actually figures out during the search, hey, you know what? I think name is the field, and Daniel, Eric, and Jonathan, and God knows who are actually the values. And we present the data like that to our customers, to the user. Now, that creates a unique position for the user where they can go, oh, I can click on name and I can say count by name. How many different names did I see today compared to yesterday? Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Or what is the top user that produces these errors? Yeah, and now it becomes really easy to structure that data and start putting it into nice visualizations and stuff like that. So in a nutshell, and a little bit simplified, that's what schemaless ingest and schema on the fly when you search actually mean. And the underlying thing is that I started out in schema-oriented big data environments where when you collect the data, you need to understand it. Otherwise, you can't push it into the mothership. Yeah, you need to say this goes into that column. And I have given up. It doesn't work. People do not know their data, and there is no fixed formats for logging data. It's unbelievable how much even the same vendor, the same product, how much that can, how much variations you can get based on, call something stupid, the language of the server may change the logging. So yeah, we've installed our server in Spanish.
Right.
Wonderful, wonderful. Ooh, panic with the vendor side, because now all the keywords are in Spanish. Holy shit, we didn't cater for that. So, I mean, I've seen so many disasters like that I've given up. And my true conviction at this moment in time is schema-less ingest is it. If you want big data, you need it. Yeah, that's the only way.
Okay, so we've recorded this just after the day after the England-Spain final, and you've thrown Spain in twice into this conversation. I mean, Erik, so I mean that's fascinating, and I understand that that's a massive rabbit hole that we could go down. So we are unfortunately almost at time. So just one question then for you is, from a technical perspective, what do you think is the most powerful feature that Sumo Logic has to offer the customers today?
I think the biggest benefit is that with very little knowledge and how do you call that? Design, you can start making sense of your data. So you can visualize what's going on without knowing a lot, without a big effort of putting it in, without employing 10 people to look at the data, organize it, all of that, right? So you can really very quickly get a sense of like, what the hell is happening in my data? Yeah, and that visualization, that sort of the combination is a few features together, stitched together, that realize this, but that is what I would say is the biggest benefit. Yeah, and everything else follows from that, I would say.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a nice place to end, because that ties in with the context conversation. You know, it's my favorite topic to talk about, context and understanding what you've got, relevance. Erik, I feel like we could go on and on about this, but my promise has always been on these videos is to keep them sort of short and digestible. So with that, thank you very much for your time. It's a really fascinating topic, and speak soon.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Thank you for your time, Dan, and we'll meet again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Later. Bye.